Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey guys, I just wanted to say first is that it's been one hell of a week. So I don't have a lot of energy, so I apologize if these videos for today seem really off, but I hope that you guys still enjoy, and yeah, thank you. Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about the Zodiac Killer, one of the world's most unsolved murder case. So, the Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer is an unidentified serial killer who operated in Northern California in the late 1960s. He is linked to have murdered 5 known victims in the San Francisco Bay Area between December 1968 and October 1969 in rural, urban, and suburban areas. He targeted 3 young couples and a lone male cab driver. The case has been described as arguably the most famous unsolved murder case in American history. The Zodiac Killer taunted police and made threats through letters sent to newspapers from 1969 to 1974 before abruptly ceasing communication. Through that connection, he claimed to have killed as many as 37 people. Despite in-depth investigation and multiple theories pertaining to his identity, no one has ever been caught for these crimes. The San Francisco Police Department marked the case inactive in 2004, but reopened it at some point prior to 2007, and to this day, it remains open. So, confirmed attacks. The 7 confirmed assault victims, 5 of whom died and 2 survived, were, first off, David Faraday, who was 17, and Betty Jensen, 16, who were shot and killed on December 20th, 1968, on Lake Herman Road within the city limits of Benicia, California. Michael Maho, 19, and Darlene Farron, 22, were shot around midnight between July 4th and 5th, 1969, in the parking lot of Blue Rock Spring Park in Vallejo, California. I am sorry if I am butchering all these names. Michael survived the attack and Darlene was pronounced dead on arrival at Kaiser Foundation Hospital. Then there was Brian Hartnell, 20, and Cecilia Shepard, 22, that were stabbed on September 27, 1969 at Lake Berryessa in Napa County, California. Brian survived, but Cecilia died as a result of her injuries on September 29th. Then there was Paul Stein, 29, who was shot and killed on October 11th, 1969, in the Presidio Heights neighborhood of San Francisco. So now we're going into the Lake Herman Road murders. The first murders widely credited to the Zodiac Killer were the shootings of 2 high school students, Betty Jensen and David Faraday, on December 20th, 1968. Betty was a 16-year-old student at Hogan High School, and on the night of the 20th, she had a date with David, a 17-year-old student from the neighboring Vallejo High School. David drove his mother's car to Betty's house at 8 p.m., and they left in the car at 8:30, driving to the house of one of Betty's friends. Sometime after 9, they drove to the outskirts of Vallejo and parked at the Lover's Lane on Lake Herman Road. A passing motorist noticed the couple between 10:15 to 10:30, parked on the side of the Lake Herman Road on a gravel runoff near the gate to a water pumping station. They were spotted again at 11. The couple were attacked sometime between 11:05 and 11:10. Police determined that an unknown attacker pulled his car up next to David's, about 10 feet away from the passenger side of the vehicle. He left his vehicle and approached the couple's car, firing several shots inside. The bullets hit numerous car parts, but not the couple. He may have been trying to force them to leave the vehicle. They both attempted to leave through the passenger door. Betty was able to get out. As David was leaving, the attacker shot him in the head with a .22 caliber rifle. The attacker began to chase Betty, who was running away. He fired 6 shots at her, hitting her in the back 5 times. He then left in his vehicle. The police theorized the whole attack took 2 to 3 minutes. A passing motorist spotted the couple's body at 11:10. She drove down the road and flagged a police patrol car to report the scene. The officers in the car immediately went to the scene. Betty was pronounced dead and David was still breathing. He was taken to the hospital but died from his wounds. Police could find no usable tire or footprints of the attacker, and there was no witnesses. They were unable to find a motive other than the killer being a madman. A deep investigation took place over the following months, but a realistic suspect was never discovered. The months afterwards, the Zodiac Killer was not confirmed to be active. Author Michael Callagher and David Van Nys suggest this was a cooling off period to reflect on his actions experienced by most serial killers. Now we're moving on to the Blue Rock Springs murder. So, background. The couple Darlene Ferrin and Michael Maho were shot around midnight between July 4th and 5th, 1969. Darlene was fatally wounded and Michael survived. Darlene was 22 and was popular with many in the community due to her job at a local restaurant. There, she met Michael, who was 19. They became friends and went on a date on July 4th, despite the fact that Darlene was still married to Dean Ferrin. After 11:30 p.m. that night, Darlene received a phone call in her house, possibly from Michael. She left and arrived at Michael's house around 11:50. Afterwards, the facts in the case became clouded with conflicted statements and speculations. Some information comes from the Zodiac researcher Robert Graysmith's work. Allegedly, immediately after Darlene and Michael left the house, they started believing or noticed that they were being followed by a man in a light-colored car. For some reason, Darlene started driving out of town in the direction of Lake Herman Road. Shortly before midnight, she turned her car into an empty parking lot of Blue Rock Springs Park. It was another popular area for couples 2 miles from Lake Herman Road. She parked 70 feet from the lot entrance, and soon another vehicle parked around 80 feet to her left. The unknown driver, a man, turned the headlights off and sat motionless at the steering wheel. Michael asked who the driver was, and Darlene roughly replied to not worry about it. The driver then left the parking lot, likely at the high speed. Now, the shooting. 5 minutes after the driver left, he returned and parked a few feet next to Darlene's vehicle at the passenger's side. He exited his car and approached Darlene's. The man shone a flashlight into the car. The couple assumed he was a policeman and rolled down the window. The man did not speak and fired a gun into the car. One bullet hit Michael in the right arm and the other hit Darlene in the neck, causing her to slump towards the steering wheel and become motionless. Michael tried to leave the car, but the door handle on the passenger side was missing or removed. The attacker stepped away from Darlene's car and went back to his own. He did not immediately leave, but instead opened his car door and did something Michael could not see. The attacker looked back at Michael, struggling to get out of Darlene's car, and moved quickly back to him. Before more shots were fired, 2 at each person, the attacker moved quickly back to his car and drove off. The attacker was heard by the golf course's caretaker, who estimated it to be at 12:10 a.m. The killer left no clues that could be traced back to him. The aftermath. Soon, 3 teenagers drove into the parking lot and saw the wounded couple. They left to get help, and police arrived at the scene at 12:20. The couple were taken to the hospital. Michael survived, but Darlene was pronounced dead at 12:40. Michael described the killer as a white man with a large face who was heavy-set, height around 5 feet 8 inches tall, weighed about 195 to 200 pounds, and had short, curly, light brown hair and a pot belly. He was wearing dark clothes and did not have glasses. These details were not enough to develop a suspect. Moments after 12:40, the Vallejo Police Department received a phone call from a public telephone within 2 blocks from them. The man on the other end of the line stated, "I want to report a double murder. If you go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park, you will find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." One thing that's really surprised me about the Zodiac Killer is that he was ballsy enough to call them, send them letters, send letters to the news people. He was really out there. And I am really surprised that they didn't catch him at all. Now we're going into the first letters from the Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac's letters, sent at least from 1969 to 1974, often started with, "This is the Zodiac speaking," and signed with a symbol resembling the crosshairs of a gun sight. Interesting. He sent out 4 cryptograms. Currently, 2 of them have been solved. One in 1969 and one in 2020, so fairly recent. The letters were postmarked San Francisco except for the March 13, 1971 letter, which was postmarked Pleasanton. His use of astrological symbols led to police to pore over occult works and astrological charts, and even to consult psychics. I had to put my hair up. Each letter also included 1/3 of a 408 symbol cryptogram, which the killer claimed contained his identity. The killer demanded that they be printed on each paper's front page. This is important, kinda. Or else he would cruise around all weekend killing lone people in the night, then move on to kill again until I end up with 12 people over the weekend. The Chronicle published its 3rd of the cryptogram on page 4 of the next day's edition. They f***ed up there, you think. But just wait. An article printed alongside the code quoted Vallejo Police Chief Jack E. Schiltz was saying, "We're not satisfied that the letter was written by the murderer," and requested the writer send a second letter with more facts to prove his identity. The threatened murders did not happen, and all 3 parts of the cryptogram were eventually published. On August 4th, the Examiner received a letter with the salutation, "Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking." This was the first time the killer had used this name for identification. The letter responded to Schiltz's request for the killer's personal information. He included details about the murders the public had not yet heard, and said that when the police cracked his code, they will have me. The FBI and CIA attempted to decode the 408 symbol cryptogram. However, on the 5th, it was cracked by Donald and Betty Hardin, a couple in Salinas. It contained a misspelled message in which the killer seemed to reference The Most Dangerous Game, a 1924 short story by Richard Connell. The author also said that he was committing the killings in order to collect slaves for his afterlife. No name appears in the decoded text. The killer said that he would not give away his identity because it would slow down or stop his slave collection. Now on to Lake Berryessa murder. On September 27th, Pacific Union College students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were picnicking at Lake Berryessa on a small island connected to a sand pit to Twin Oak Ridge. A white male about 5 feet 11 inches, weighing more than 170 pounds, approached the couple wearing a black executioner's type hood with clip-on sunglasses over the eye holes and a bib-like device on his chest that had a white 3x3-inch cross circle symbol on it. The hooded man approached with a gun, which Brian believed to be a .45, and claimed to be an escaped convict from a jail with a 2-word name in either Colorado or Montana, where he had officers later inferred that the man had been referring to a jail in Deer Lodge, Montana, yet a park ranger claimed that Brian told him the man referenced Colorado. That was a lot to read. The hooded man then said that he needed their car and money to travel to Mexico because the stolen vehicle was too hot. The killer had brought pre-cut lengths of plastic clothing line and told Cecilia to tie up Brian before the killer did the same with her. The killer checked and tightened Brian's bonds after discovering that Cecilia had bound them loosely. Brian initially believed this event to be a bizarre robbery, but the man drew a knife and stabbed them both repeatedly. Brian suffered 6 wounds, which he survived, and Cecilia received 10 in the process. She sadly died. The killer then hiked 500 yards to the Knoxville Road, drew the cross circle symbol on Brian's car door with a black felt tip pen. Now, lastly of the murders, we got the Presidio Heights murder. The shooting. 2 weeks later, at around 9:40 p.m. on October 11th, a white male passenger, the Zodiac, entered the taxi driven by Paul Stein in downtown San Francisco, requesting to be driven to Washington and Maple Streets in Presidio Heights. When they arrived, the passenger asked to be driven 1 block down to Washington and Cherry Streets. The reason for this request is unknown. Perhaps the Zodiac saw someone close by or wanted to drive to the next block's corner, which was darker and obscured by a large tree. Stein then drove the distance. At approximately 9:55 p.m., the Zodiac shot Paul in the head with a handgun, likely killing him immediately. The Zodiac then took Paul's wallet and car keys. That was the last officially confirmed murder by the Zodiac. 3 teenagers across the street witnessed the incident and phoned the San Francisco Police Department while the crime was in progress, saying the man in question was a husky white man wearing a dark or black jacket. The dispatcher mistakenly broadcasted to police that the suspect was a black man. The witnesses also observed the killer wiping the cab down and seemingly rifling through the man's clothing. As he leaned on the inside of the cab and cleaned it up, he left partial prints from 2 of his right hand's fingers. 2 blocks from the crime scene, patrol officers responded to the radio dispatch and arrived at Washington and Cherry 2 minutes after the phone call was placed. They observed a white male in dark clothes walking north, away from the crime scene and towards the Presidio Army base. This man may have been the Zodiac. When the officer's patrol car pulled up alongside the man, they asked him if he had seen anything suspicious. He responded that he had seen a man waving a gun earlier and went east down Washington. They drove quickly away, believing that a black man was the culprit. Now, the aftermath. Moments later, when the police arrived at the scene, Paul was declared dead and a search began of the nearby area, including the Presidio. The Zodiac had likely escaped by that point, getting into a parked car and driving across the Golden Gate Bridge. The Stein murder was initially believed to be a routine robbery that had escalated into homicidal violence. However, on October 13th, the Chronicle received a new letter from the Zodiac that claimed credit for the killing and contained a torn section of Paul's bloody shirt as proof. The letter also included a threat about killing school children on a school bus. In response, Bay Area police departments began escorting school buses. The officers who initially responded realized a few days after the murder they had seen the Zodiac, and a few days later they helped make a composite sketch of the man alongside the teenage witnesses. SFPD detectives Bill Armstrong and Dave Toschi were assigned to the case. Now last, further Zodiac messages. On a greeting card to the Chronicle postmarked April 28, 1970, the Zodiac wrote, "I hope you enjoy yourselves when I have my blast," followed by his cross-circle signature. On the back of the card, the Zodiac threatened to use the bus bomb soon unless the newspaper published the full details that he had written. He also wanted to start seeing people wearing some nice Zodiac buttons. June 1970 letter and map. In a letter postmarked June 26, 1970, the Zodiac stated that he was upset that he did not see people wearing Zodiac buttons, writing, "I shot a man sitting in a parked car with a .38. The Zodiac was possibly referring to the murder of SFPD Sergeant Richard, who was killed 1 week earlier after being shot through the window of a squad car by an unidentified gunman during a routine traffic stop. The SFPD denies that the Zodiac was involved in Richard's death. The murder remained unsolved. Included with the letter was a Phillips 66 road map of the San Francisco Bay Area. In the image of Mount Diablo, the Zodiac had drawn across circles similar to those from previous correspondence. At the top of the cross circle, he placed a 0, a 3, 6, and a 9. The accompanying instructions stated that the 0 was to be set to Meg N. The letter also included a 32-letter cipher that the killer claimed would, and thought with the code, lead to the location of a bomb that he had buried and set to detonate in the fall. The cipher was never decoded and the alleged bomb was never located. July 1970 letters. In a letter postmarked July 24, 1970, the Zodiac took credit for the Kathleen Johns abduction, 4 months after the incident. In a July 26, 1970 letter, the Zodiac paraphrased a song from The Mikado, adding his own lyrics about making a little list of the ways in which he planned to torture his slaves in paradise. The letter was signed with a large exaggerated cross-circle symbol and a new score sign equals 13 and SFPD 0. A final note at the bottom of the letter stated, P.S. The Mount Diablo code concerns radians, inches along the radians. In 1981, a close examination of the radian hint by Zodiac researcher Gareth Penn led to the discovery that the radian angle, when placed over the map per Zodiac's instructions, pointed to the location of 2 Zodiac attacks. October 1970 cards. On October 7th, 1970, the Chronicle received a 3x5-inch card nicknamed the 13-hole punch card, signed by the Zodiac with the symbol and a small cross reportedly drawn with blood. The card's message was formed by pasting words and letters from an edition of the Chronicle, and 13 holes were punched across the card. Inspectors Bill and Dave agreed that it was highly probable that the card had been sent by the Zodiac. On October 27, 1970, Avery received a Halloween card signed with the letters Z and the Zodiac's cross circle symbol. Handwritten inside the card was the note, "Peekaboo, you are doomed." The threat was taken seriously and was the subject of a front-page story in the Chronicle. The phrase 14 in the letter was interpreted as a possible reference to the 14 victims. Avery started packing a pistol while Chronicle reporters jokingly started wearing buttons saying, "I am not Avery." Soon after receiving the letter, Avery received an anonymous letter alerting him to the similarities between the Zodiac's activities and the unsolved Bates murder in Riverside. March 1971 letter. In the March 13, 1971 letter to the Los Angeles Times, the Zodiac criticized that the police were unable to catch him, saying he had killed 17 victims. Zodiac expert Tom Voigt theorized that the reason why the letter was postmarked from Pleasanton instead of San Francisco was for the joke of having an unpleasant letter come from Pleasanton. The final Zodiac letter. After the Lake Tahoe card, the Zodiac remained silent for nearly 3 years. The Chronicle then received a letter from the Zodiac, postmarked January 29, 1974, which complained that columnist Count Marco needed to feel superior to everyone and praised the film The Exorcist, 1973, as the best satirical comedy that I have ever seen. The letter included a snippet of verse from The Mikado and an unusual symbol at the bottom that has remained unexplained by researchers. Zodiac concluded the letter with a new score, Me 37, SFPD 0. David Van Nuys, who is also a psychiatrist, believes the reason the Zodiac stopped killing is because he had a case of multiple personality disorder which lessened over time, as with many people who have the case, noting that the subsequent Zodiac letters lessened in intensity. Now lastly, the 21st century development. In April 2004, the SFPD marked the case inactive, citing caseload pressure and resource demands, effectively closing the case. However, they reopened their case sometime before March of 2007. The case is open in Napa County and in the city of Riverside. In May 2018, the Vallejo Police Department announced their intention to attempt to collect the Zodiac's DNA from the back of the stamps he used during his correspondence. The analysis by a private laboratory was expected to check the DNA against GED match. It was hoped the Zodiac would be caught in a similar fashion to the serial killer Joseph James D'Angelo. In May 2018, a Vallejo police detective said that no results were expected in several weeks. As of December 2019, no results had been reported. The FBI's investigation was still continuing as of 2020. Hey guys, if you made it to the end, I just want to say thank you for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed, and go watch the other video for today. All love. Thank you.